Hello. Welcome to the In Love with Business podcast. This miniseries is titled Chief Sustainability Heroes and is hosted by Professor Paolo Melina and Melina Shore from University College London, School of Management. Throughout this series, we will talk to sustainability leaders from different organizations and sectors to learn about their sustainability journeys. We will ask them about their career paths, the challenges they encountered in implementing complex strategies of sustainable transformation, and what inspired them along the way. We will also ask what advice they would offer to aspiring chief sustainability officers. Enjoy the episode.
Today, we are pleased to welcome Anke Ehlers, Managing Director for International Sustainability at the ALDI SOUTH Group. The ALDI SOUTH Group is a global retailer with more than 7,000 stores located across 11 countries on 4 continents. And today the company employs about 200,000 people globally. Hank joined the ALDI SOUTH Group in 2010 as a corporate responsibility manager and quickly made her mark. Between 2012 to 2014, she was seconded to the ALDI Asian office, where she established corporate responsibility units in Hong Kong and Bangladesh, responsible for monitoring human rights and environmental standards across the company's supply chain. Between 2014 and 2018, she held various leadership roles in ALDI's International Sustainability Department in Germany. And in 2019, she stepped into the role of a Managing Director for International Sustainability and began building the company's International Sustainability Department in Salzburg, Austria. And if I understand you are connected from Salzburg today, Hank. She now leads a team of more than 190. Wow, this must be one of the biggest sustainability teams we came across. 190 sustainability experts located in 3 offices in Austria, Bangladesh, and Hong Kong. And prior to joining ALDI, she worked in the German Parliament and the BMW Group's Global Sustainability Department. She's a mother of 3 kids, and she serves in the board of several sustainability-focused initiatives. Hank, it is truly a pleasure to have you in our podcast show. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Paolo, and thanks, Melina, for having me. And wow, that it took about almost 2 minutes to introduce me, which always makes me blush a little bit.
is an important I guess biography. So it is I guess it's important to read it well. But I guess the purpose of today is really we wanted to kind of understand more about your work and the type of transformation that you are driving at the ALDI SOUTH Group. So can we maybe start with you telling us a little bit more about your path to becoming a managing director responsible for sustainability in your company?
Sure. I mean, you have already basically mentioned all the different steps from a CV point of view. But maybe I start once again kind of going back in time into, let's say, the late 2010s, 2000, sorry, where I started to kind of discover this topic of sustainability, corporate sustainability, where it was still mainly called CSR or CR. But mostly when you typed it into kind of a job search machine, it was coming up like customer relations or something. So this kind of profession was not really there yet. But I mean, you already mentioned that I actually started my career after studying politics and social science in the German parliament. And back in the days, about 2005, I think many governments, many societies kind of understood, okay, planetary boundaries become more and more visible. Demographic change is something that is impacting societies. And this topic of sustainability became kind of a theme. So I picked it up and I started to search for another education. So I found actually a master in sustainability management. I was back in the days the first intake. So also this was still a very pretty new theme in universities. I think in, let's say, there wasn't even a full master's, but it was kind of an MBA that you could take basically after your first proper study. And I did this and I very much enjoyed it. And I was so intrigued by this combination of, let's say, a lot of trend horizon scanning, thinking about what are the different implications that businesses need to face and need to react to, but also being very kind of specific. So a lot of mix of science, law, business, but also, people, human resource elements, how to really transform a business, communicate change. So I think this mix of all sorts of things kind of has been something that I really, really kind of fell in love with. And I had this idea, I want to kind of work in this field. So my first role actually was in BMW, which was, from a German point of view, back in the days, was 2008, one of the only companies that already had a proper corporate department for sustainability. I started work there basically just in the same time when we had this first financial crisis, and I was pretty sure like I will never find a job really in this area. Also, BMW was clear, they will not take people. Basically, they had also kind of recruitment freeze for permanent roles. But then I saw actually that ALDI was looking for someone, so I became the second employee of the department that was just about to be founded. Still from I think the key drivers back in the days for many businesses was more reputational management, compliance aspects. So it was still a very different world. But this is how I started in the business. And you already actually talked about also my time in Asia. This was really my key theme, how to ensure human rights standards in our supply chain. And this was, I think, is still a very pressing topic, to be honest. So it's not that I would say after now 15 years now in ALDI and also trying to do so many things in this area that things are basically now all great and we don't have human rights violations in our supply chain. But at least things have evolved and there's much more transparency. So long short, this basically is my pathway. And you already mentioned that the team has also grown massively. I have basically the big honor to lead the team since now 6 years. And I think the size, but also basically the structure is just detrimental to the shifting relevance of sustainability in a business context from more a thing that you do basically to stay out of the news and headlines to understanding the strategic relevance and also the business case of it.
And can I ask you, Anke, to elaborate on what really attracted you about sustainability as a topic? Why, at a certain point you decided to go in this direction?
So, as I said, I think I kind of found myself always on those kind of segues of different themes. So from politics and society, but also business and how to prepare basically for future developments. And that's in essence also what basically my daily job is about. So to understand where is the business currently positioned? What are the influences from a customer perspective, customer expectation perspective? What are governments and regulators basically planning to do? What is the overall, let's say, how can I say, zeitgeist or sentiment in a society? And then suggest, and not to forget, obviously, aspects like resilience, changes in, for example, our supply chains due to climate change, and then to basically from that subtract something that can then go into the strategy. So I think this kind of taking it from a high level to something very specific, I always loved in sustainability, and I think that's still the case. And obviously, it changes, but I think that's what was kind of from day one something I really liked, and the mix of different themes, the collaborative elements. So I call myself an octopus because I have to have my arms everywhere, in the business, and you have to connect with people, and you have to kind of be a change agent at the same time. Also get things done. So I think this combination I really like.
I I love the octopus metaphor. I guess many CSOs that we interviewed in the first season as well as in this second season, they gave us very interesting original metaphors of concerning the role of the CSO. Being, I guess, the director of an orchestra, being a popular one. But I personally really like the octopus one. It makes it, I guess, very easy to understand.
My alternative one is the spider and the web, but I think the octopus is somehow nicer.
They're both great visuals and analogies, I think, for the role. And actually, speaking of your role, so you've been in the role of Managing Director of International Sustainability for, as you mentioned, about 6 years now. And how would you define and describe that role, given that spider in the web or octopus analogy?
So I would actually see 3 key kind of roles or themes basically that describe my role best. So first of all, the strategy element. So I think this role must be able to set a strategy and to also supervise, guide, operationalize a strategy in terms of execution, not always executing it itself, but making sure that all parts of the business understand their role in bringing the strategy to life. So I think that's kind of the first key role. The second is exactly that stakeholder management piece. Yeah. So being the octopus within the business, understanding the rhythm of the business, making sure that things go into basically the different ways that a business takes decisions and make sure the decisions are also executed, monitored, followed up, reported. So that's the second. And there's obviously also an external component in terms of stakeholder management. I think I don't need to tell you much about academia, but also I think overall the way that we collaborate, not just with our direct suppliers, but also our deeper supply chain partners, our consumers. We are always the bridge basically between the supply chain, the consumer, as well as other businesses and the whole industry. So that's the stakeholder component, the second one. Yeah. And the third one for CSOs, obviously also to lead people, to lead the team, to lead often directly, but also indirectly in organization. I think is a key aspect in the CSO role as a leader. Right. So it's strategy, stakeholder management, and leadership actually, or leading teams are to me kind of what really makes a CSO special.
Right. Okay. And based on your experience, because it sounds like you've worked in many different areas, and sustainability is obviously very multidimensional, and you obviously and you have that perspective that you can bring from supply chain, from different regions of the world. So based on your experience, what are the significant challenges facing organizations and then how do you address them in your role?
So unfortunately, I think there are many challenges, too many, sometimes for my taste. So I mean, you already mentioned an introduction that the ALDI SOUTH Group is a global retail company, which is obviously fantastic. We are actually still in a growth trajectory. So we have now businesses in 11 countries on 4 continents. And that is obviously allows us to have a kind of global leverage. At the same time, navigating different countries, consumer expectations, different also administrations, political kind of development and sentiments, as well as also kind of, I think the current anti-ESG movement, cost of living crisis. So it's a perfect mix kind of in terms of this the global scene that we are now navigating in. I think that's the number one. The number 2 is overall the change management. I mean, we already discussed stakeholder management being the octopus, but I think it's a constant challenge, but also opportunity to carrying the whole entire company along, right? To translate something quite complex and also quite volatile into something tangible, into tangible actions, to create ownership and empower people without giving them all a handbook or playbook and not knowing all the potential answers to all the questions. But also making sure that we are not kind of wasting money, because sometimes if you are just too open to a business and everyone is, I think in general quite positive and motivated about sustainability, it could end up in a mushrooming of all sorts of initiatives that, again, you're like, oh, it doesn't really make the boat go faster. So kind of to govern this and make sure that there's a certain prioritization, I think is another challenge. I already mentioned this uncertainty. So that's something that I think is like, I mean, everyone talks about uncertainty, but I personally feel that this profession or function is very much kind of challenged by uncertainty. So actually last week, just maybe a very practical example, we did kind of our annual objective and key results session with all my team leads in the department, and we were reflecting the last year. And one colleague said, you know what, I planned the last year perfectly, but in the end, I only was able to deliver 10% of what I planned because there were so many new things coming in. I couldn't ignore, I couldn't reject, but it's just the reality. So you're planning, you try to kind of plan resources and timelines and project plans. And then, whatever, a CSRD comes on your table and you're like, oh my God, what should I do next? A big IT project lands on your table, oh my God, they also need me, these kind of things. Like there are so many aspects that it's very hard to basically almost ring fence their resources, your time. And you, in most cases, need to always decide when to say no and when to just accept and plan again. And I think talking about IT, I mean, we are in the middle of a big digitalization project. So we are at the moment trying to to redesign all our processes and sustainability, take all the legislation into account and basically set ourselves up for a very, let's say, a very stable new IT basically infrastructure, which is also in itself kind of a big challenge. I would say data technology is another kind of challenge. At the same time, I mean, there are solutions, just take a lot of time and also effort and resources to kind of find them and set them up and make them kind of integrated with each other in one landscape. And then I have two more challenges.
Yeah.
So I think everything around, I mean, from a retailer point of view, when I have, obviously I'm in touch also with CSO from other industries and businesses, but when I look at retail, I think it's just important to understand that we don't talk about one product or one supply chain, but whatever we do, basically, so 99% of our impacts are on our supply chain. So first of all, there's so little we can control ourselves directly. So, and in the supply chain, we don't talk about just textiles or just electronics. We talk about basically everything. And it's about millions and millions of basically stakeholders in our supply chain. We first need to know and then be able to talk to and to change behaviors, mindset, processes, whatever. So that's in itself already kind of a quite significant challenge.
Daunting, yeah.
Daunting. And I think once again, this topic of don't lose focus, like make sure that even though there are things coming in, to find a way to understand what now really makes most business sense and to go back to it. I think this agility and at the same time getting things done and not always like every couple of weeks totally change your focus again, because then you don't get anything done. I think that's something I can see right now is really challenging.
Right. Okay, so having that sort of bigger picture and prioritizing as you go.
Exactly.
And so within the list of challenges there, you did mention, so being a multinational organization, you're in 11 countries. How do you navigate the different sort of compliance and regulatory landscapes? Because I imagine obviously that it does differ from region to region. And then related to that, how do you stay up to speed with the changes of those regulations on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, very good question. So I think maybe first of all, I think it's just important to recognize that for many years also of my career, we were operating sustainability basically in a very free way. So there were almost no frameworks. I mean, a couple of voluntary frameworks, but the majority of what companies have set as an ambition was basically based on, I don't know, the customer demands, the shareholder ambition, the benchmark. And now this has totally changed. And especially in the European Union context, I continue to say to my team and also to everyone in the business, now compliance is the new bold. Because, I mean, back in the days when I started, compliance was kind of, oh yeah, you work for a company that is, just wants to be compliant. That's quite uninteresting, not so interesting. I think now it has totally changed, because if you really screen the different pieces of legislation, we talk about, for us, with our different product categories, about 30 plus, so 30 plus legislations in the pipeline. And more coming also in all the different markets. I mean, China, I think, has just adopted a similar thing like the CSRD. I mean, US might slow down now a little bit, also, but even there on state level, there are still different pieces of legislation coming up. But the European Union itself already, with the Green Deal, there's so much in the pipeline. And as much as I think we have all tried to position ourselves and advocate for a level playing field and for much more regulation, I think right now what we all try to digest is that, first of all, to monitor what is going on in different markets is a massive challenge. I mean, we have, for example, a system, I think we've just recently onboarded a system, like a legal support system that screens basically the whole internet for certain information. When is a new law basically published, adopted, what are the different processes? We have now also invested a lot of efforts. We've even built up a small legal team for ESG-related legislation that is screening basically this and tries to translate and interpret all the different legislations. We have also now very much improved and changed our whole compliance management system, because we see this was just not sufficient looking at what comes our way. But I can tell you it's a real challenge. And maybe one link back to your question across all the different geographies. I mean, we are just now about to set a new strategy beyond 25. And as I just already mentioned, I mean, in the past, I have already done a couple of strategy development processes. It was quite simple, like, what are your reference points? How do you start, basically? But now it's like, okay, understand the legal context first and even interpret it. It's not black and white. You have to set your own ambition within the legal interpretation. It's not that it's telling you, it's usually telling you the best effort. What is the best effort? And if it's still not even implemented, so you don't know what left and right is doing in terms of best effort, there is no precedence created. You have to first define your own standpoint, and then you have to think about, okay, so do I now just put a European standpoint as my global ambition? And then maybe in Europe, it's not even any ambition, because people will say, oh, you're just legal compliant. You're even not allowed anymore to really talk about it. So the European Union is basically forbidding you, if you're just, your ambition is the legal level, you cannot even talk about it anymore. But in the US, for example, which is our biggest market by far now, this is obviously a thing. So this is currently where we try to kind of set ourselves a standard, or kind of a level. And maybe to close it up. So our logic right now is we think in the majority of fields, for example, packaging reduction and recycled content, and also human rights due diligence, I think it's quite extensive what is asked for us. And if we just extend it to the global level, that's a good enough ambition. But we would, for example, not start to also expect like those administrative reporting burdens to countries that are not legally bound to it, right? So we would really look into where do things make sense. For example, if we buy a certain packaging globally, then let's make sure that the recycled content is the same, for example, to also have economies of scale benefit from it. But we would not, everywhere just ask, for example, the US to submit deforestation due diligence statements, even though they don't need to kind of adhere to the EU deforestation regulation, for example.
Right. Yeah, so lots of moving parts for sure.
Absolutely. And Anke, I was very interested in reading your biography in the work you did in Asia, in focused on human rights and environmental standards. And today, of course, the topic of sustainable supply chain management and being responsible for what happens in your supply chain is a very hot topic. For example, the European Union, with the CSDD directive, I guess is stressing that responsibility. So can you, elaborate on that experience in Asia? I guess, what did you learn being on the field and how you developed that type of initiative for ALDI SOUTH Group?
So, as I said already, when I started in the business, it was very much about how to basically protect the business from a reputational point of view. And I think human rights and supply chains, because of pressure, especially from NGOs, has been one of those prime, let's say, themes that many businesses started this kind of function with, right? So if I also look left and right, especially in retail, I would say, and also in certain brands, it's a very similar pattern. And to me, those years, and yes, they're already quite long ago, so now more than 10 years ago, have been very, very intense, because I was coming basically from a very idealistic and maybe very theoretical concept of, yeah, sure, human rights and working conditions and, the ILO standards and, a lot of, let's say, theoretical knowledge. And I think Western world thinking of this must be it, to Asia, and was basically seeing more than 400 factories. I've been in many audits, and I also basically my time in Bangladesh the first time coincided also with the Rana Plaza tragedy. So I think I had a lot of moments where I was like, oh my God, like this is like real. And I, from a personal point of view, also obviously growing up in Germany, I even didn't expect the higher level of manual labor still involved in all sorts of everyday products. And I think just from an pure understanding of, oh my God, how much, like, or how little, the other way, how little consumers really even appreciate what they have. And again, reflecting also on the role of ALDI South, because obviously we are a discount retailer and we want to make sustainability affordable for everyone. So what's the right level of basically offering competitive prices and making sure that basically everyone can live a good life, at the same time making sure that the conditions, how things have been produced, are basically fair and in line with standards, I think was something that was very tangible to me in those days. And what I also kind of learned and realized being in so many factories across many Asia and farms is that many businesses, including ourselves, obviously rely very much on auditing standard certification schemes, because that's the only way you can really scale your commitments and have a certain level of, let's say, check monitoring. But it's a matter of fact that there's so much intransparency and also basically faking of results, which was also back in the days to me shocking, that our program, and also the reason why we have established basically our own teams we have until today, is to say, we need to understand how deep is the water, like what are the problems we really have, because the reports apparently don't tell us enough, and it's not a good enough risk management system. So our approach from the teams we have on site is to basically ask for full transparency first. So to say, you will definitely have problems everyone else has as well. You will have overtime problems. You will have, I don't know, subcontracting of our products potentially, but please tell us. And if you don't tell us, that's a problem for us. But if you tell us, we can work together. And I think this was, and it still is, it requires a lot of trust actually. And I think I can see that we put a lot of effort into it, but we are one of the only ones. Like for many, for example, in fish and seafood, we are still, like, our team is the only team that ever goes from a retail sector into the facilities. No one else is doing it. They all have the certifications and say, okay, it's great. We just, we are happy that the result is everything is great. And the question is there, and to be honest, it's still like until today a question that I have to me and the business and the whole sector: is it good to know more? Because then the more you know, the more problems you have you need to deal with? Or, as I think many businesses are more closing their eyes and are like, okay, when something comes up, I will deal with it. If not, then not. And you already mentioned CSDDD. And I think it's another element. So now, back in the days, I think there was a trend to be more open about challenges, to disclose. Many businesses have to disclose how many shallow they find, for example. And I can see now again that people get very, very careful, and they really are now maybe even taking more information out, trying to be super careful about what to do, what to see. And that's another, I think, aspect where it's hard for business to navigate compliance in a meaningful, impactful way, because I think I can see in many aspects that there are quite a number of unintended consequences, where I think also we as a business right now are just carefully evaluating what still makes sense, what's the best approach. But I think overall I always really supported and pushed for our business to really know what's going on, and to then also know how to mitigate.
And kind of a follow-up question. Have you seen like a tangible benefit of these enhanced sustainable supply chain management practices? Because, for example, you mentioned, the terrible tragedy of the Rana Plaza, and I guess what is interesting, for example, in that episode is that one of the missing brands that wasn't involved in the scandal and the problems that took place was Nike. And Nike wasn't there because basically the procurement team had visited the facilities months before, and they came back saying it is too risky to operate there, and as a consequence of that they basically prevented being a part of that tragedy. And I guess this more sustainable approach to supply chain management was I guess the consequence of the trouble that they had at Nike in 1996 with the big scandal associated to child labor. So there is, I guess, a real benefit in proper sustainable supply chain management, right? I mean, it's risk management at the end. Have you seen this in practice with your work? Preventing risks and preventing financial loss.
Very clearly. So I think when I went first to Bangladesh 2011 and was then screening basically our factory scene there. I mean, we are not known really primarily as a textile retailers, but we also do sell textiles, and I think this is very similar in all the other categories we are selling and focusing on. There have been a time where basically many businesses, they were just had a lot of middlemen, intermediaries, and they were just sourcing from them, not really knowing exactly where the products are coming from, also not really expecting a proper management system. And this was one of our key starting points to say, it's not even, it's impossible for a business of our size to know each and every factory in the first instance. But what is important is that we are much more consciously selecting our direct business partners. And that's still until today one of our key principles. And we have now basically extended, we have a quite thorough evaluation system for our key suppliers to, I think now it's 9 different product categories. And it's always part to really screen their factory base and to assess their management system and their ability to select the right partners, to monitor the right partners, and also to mitigate a situation. And this has become such an integrated part of our buying practices. And I think this was a key realization. It shouldn't be the sustainability team to be kind of the one cleaning up afterwards and being the policeman, but we need to kind of have an integrated strategic approach to the suppliers we select. And I mean, it's I think it's quite common sense, but still good to just say it. A supplier, a business partner that understands the human rights standards and how to apply them in practice is also the one that understands the quality standards and how to apply them in practice, and that also is able to deliver on time, and is just in general has good business practices, right? And is someone that has a proper team, people that actually know what they're doing, this is just it's one package, and sustainability is just one aspect of many. And I think this was something that we as a business clearly see. And now we have reduced the number of suppliers, significantly, like, I don't know, 80% or something. like we have now really managed to get down to a very small group of core suppliers, and this is what we do in many, many big categories, and also are integrating basically our sustainability credentials or expectation and long-term agreements, and we can really see that also from an even financial point of view, from an buying price, for example, point of view, there are a lot of benefits to maintain this longer term strategic relation, apart from not being put into risk and danger with, sites or facilities that are just, putting you into the negative headlines.
And
Makes sense for the business.
let me ask you one more question, then I'm going to hand over to Melina. But you've been in the field for a while now. And as you correctly said at the beginning, sustainability is a topic that keeps evolving. And there are also like new topics in sustainability. So in your opinion, having been in the field for a while, what are the critical skills of a CSO, a sustainability leader in general? What do you need to be able to do, and what capabilities you need to have in order to be effective in driving change?
Yeah. So I think you have to be a change lover. So not someone that wants routine. I think then you are wrong in this in this profession. So change lover, change agent, and someone that actually has, I think, strong communication skills, ability to communicate with impact, to kind of touch people, both from a business acumen point of view, as well as I think on a certain emotional level. You have to be very resilient. I think that's the constant thing, that you have to live with pushbacks. You need to kind of stand up again, find a new way. Don't give up. I think that's a key theme, and I'm afraid will become a stronger theme in the coming months and years. I already mentioned the octopus element, so being able to collaborate, to basically build relationships, to network within the business, but also outside of the business. Being a strong leader. So I mentioned this horizontal and vertical leadership, because in the end of the day, you also need to influence other teams that are not directly kind of your teams. I think, to me, this analytical and strategic mindset is important. You have to understand the big picture. You have to kind of have an understanding about your North Star, your compass, and then again, be able to also compartmentalize, structure it, and project manage. I think that's also something that becomes more and more a key skill, because we just kind of, it feels like only work in projects anymore. Learn fast, and still ask questions. I think stay curious, because there's so much to learn. Like every day I learned so many new things from my teams and from so many other people around me. And I would say this personal drive, I think, is still important. And also be an authentic person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that I'm never flying, taking a plane to go on holiday, but again, I think, I think there should be a certain level. Exactly. Walking the talk, and so I think that's maybe enough, but
Great.
That's great. And Anke, when you reflect on your experience and the work you've done so far, in your role in sustainability at ALDI, can you share with us, or can you think of one particular sustainability initiative that's been successful and that you're really proud of, that you've been involved in implementing?
Okay, so
I'm sure it might be hard to pick one, but
as I said, I'm now kind of in the business in sustainability since 15 years, so it feels definitely hard to remember or to kind of bring up this one. So I think maybe let's start to reflect, I think, on strategy and embedding this theme of sustainability into our business strategy. So I think I have been honored enough to be part basically of a process to really reflect what's the business case of sustainability, and to make the business understand that cost leadership, which is one of our key strategic aspects, and sustainability kind of go hand in hand, and they are kind of two sides of the same coin. And we have a massive opportunity to make sustainability affordable. I think this, to kind of just land this in the business, to make this part of our vision of our global strategy, was a massive achievement. And I think it still brings so many opportunities to this vision and is really guiding our business. And I think kind of the latest, more tangible, big achievement was that we finally got the validation of the SBTI on our actually net zero targets, which I think made us among few retailers that got the targets recently validated. And that's obviously has been hard work. And I mean, now the real work starts. So it's just the first step, but already this one. So whoever really knows what's behind getting it validated knows it's a lot of actually work behind it. So that basically was a recent milestone.
That's amazing. Yeah, no small feat for sure.
Yeah.
And so, Paolo mentioned at the beginning that your team, when we think about, so as a company, you're 200,000 more or less people worldwide, but your team itself is about 190 people, which is significant in size as well. Can you share with us a little bit about how your team is structured? So I guess globally and how you work together, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I agree. It's a very big team. It also actually entails the teams we have in Asia to do the monitoring work actually on a daily basis on factories and farms. And obviously we are a global business in all the different markets, where we also then have a network of national colleagues that also are responsible for sustainability. I think our current structure, to answer this question, we have a team that does more the strategic positioning in the different themes, our big focus areas. So actually we have in total 6 dimensions of our strategy. And there are experts that understand, for example, everything around packaging and waste, everything around climate and nature, about human rights, and welfare, health, nutrition, and so on and so forth. So these are basically the expert teams from a strategic point of view, setting strategies and working on different initiatives from a strategic point of view. And then we actually have teams that do the business implementation. So they're almost like business partners that work very integrated with, for example, the buying organizations, but also supply chain organizations that have very close relationship with real estate. So they basically are there to support the execution. And I think especially the second part of my team, of my department, I would say from a future focus point of view, and this is, I think, what you can read also a lot in different studies and research, the more mature an organization gets, the more those teams should be embedded in other business functions. And also, for example, use now the digitized landscape we are currently developing and setting up to maybe also get things more optimized, get, for example, data generation more where they actually belong, to have more synergies with buying teams, for example, when we collect packaging data as an example.
Okay. And just from a reporting structure perspective, like where is your role positioned in the organization? Are you reporting into the CEO, for instance?
Yes, I'm reporting into the International Commercial Officer. Okay. International Chief Commercial Officer, sorry. And that's basically a part of the international board.
Okay. That's great.
Yes.
Thank you, Anke. I guess, conscious of time, I have 2 final questions for you. And before you were mentioning your SBTI initiative, and I'm very glad to hear you made a commitment on that front. And I guess, climate action, it's probably one of the biggest challenges facing society right these days. And I guess if you look at what has been happening in the last 12 months in terms of geopolitics, in terms of what happened at COP in Azerbaijan, I think 2024 was the first year that saw basically SBTI decreasing in terms of a number of companies in the initiative instead of increasing for the first time. So I guess when you look at that, so for example, net zero action, Are you positive about where we are going? Do you think we're gonna get there? And what is the role of business in that journey? Or are you kind of negative about that journey?
So I think just for my personal kind of pulse check, I think these days it's important to stay positive. So I think it's easy to get negative and to get into doom and gloom, and obviously I also have those moments where I'm like, oh God, like it's totally getting totally the other way around, dreaming back of those 2020, 21, 22 years where everything felt like finally we are getting there. And now it's kind of, very different trajectory. At the same time, what makes me positive is actually that the solutions are there and they're also very tangible and they are actually implementable. Maybe not to the minus 90% degree, but there's so much possible. And I think, I think that's kind of important, almost to kind of ignore the noise and try to be very focused on that's our commitment, that's the budget we need to implement, that's exactly the decisions we need to take with supplier X, Y, Z to just get going.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my strategy. I mean, however, obviously a business is actually just people working with people, and everyone in the business is part of obviously this world, and it's on social media, and the sentiment cannot be ignored. But I think it's important just now to really stay focused and to just take the steps we can take. And yes, there will be maybe in a couple of years' time we get to a certain plateau where we need to again think about innovations and find new solutions. But I think it's just important to really reflect and just understand the solutions for 80% of what we need to do are there already, and we just now need to make them part of our ways to operate.
Yeah, fantastic. And one final question for you. This podcast show is followed by many kind of young professionals. People probably aspiring to have an international career similar to yours. People aspiring to I guess have a leadership seat at some point as you have at the moment. So what is your advice to them? Your advice to those who are starting a career in sustainability today?
Yeah, good question. So I think what is interesting in sustainability is that there's not one, how do you call it, way to Rome. I don't know if that was into English, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like there are different ways to get there, right?
It works with me. I'm Italian.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And I'm in Canada. It works for me too. So I think it's international.
So actually, it's not that, okay, study that, do that, then you become it, right? Which is obviously positive. At the same time, when someone is just so determined, I want to become this, please just give me the prescription. This might not work like that. So I think I guess today there are many different possibilities to study something around sustainability and how to basically do this in a business context. So I think that's obviously from my point of view, and also looking into my team and also all the young team members, obviously I think a first starting point. What I can see, I think, as a key aspect to really have it as a career, basically pathway, is to have a good mix of being passionate, knowing your staff, but also being pragmatic and practical. Because in the business, no one, yes, maybe sometimes people look at me like as the internal NGO, never enough kind of. At the same time, this should not be, this should not be the only attitude. So there must be kind of a pragmatism and also saying, you know what, that's not necessary right now. We have bigger fish to fry. Don't kind of get focused on things that don't really matter that much, which I think sometimes can be. I have an observation that people sometimes are so focused on. Let me think about an example. Maybe a good example is, back in the days, we were always fixated on we have to have a 100% goal, 100% certified cocoa goal. And then we were discussing, the 98% was all fine or good. But then we were discussing like the cocoa powder on the tiramisu, the poor supplier. It would cost like a fortune to kind of change it to certified because this supplier is just not using cocoa as a key ingredient. So they don't really source much of it. So, and then, you get hooked up on those kind of conversations. You know what? 89 is absolutely fine.
It's fine.
Just relax, relax. Let's focus, the efforts on something else. Sometimes people can be quite kind of focused on things.
Yeah.
And I think just to find a good way of choosing your battles wisely, thinking about what can create the biggest impact, I think that's a key way to, I guess, grow a career, at least in a corporate environment, because corporates obviously are different than NGOs or government organizations. And yes, but I think, to be honest, it's my dream job and I could not think about a better job. And let's see if I motivate my kids also to go into this direction or not. But yeah, I mean, it's also a lot of work, a lot of overtime. Like overtime means obviously engagement. You're always kind of on. But it's definitely it's a great area to work in.
Fantastic. Anke, it was really wonderful to have you in our show. Thank you very much for your precious time. And congratulations for all the good work you're doing at ALDI SOUTH Group.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And thanks for basically doing this podcast, for giving people the possibility to understand what people in this field are doing. Because to be honest, back in the days, I would have loved something like this to just listen in and get a better understanding kind of for people that know what they are basically talking about because they work in this field. So highly appreciate it that you give people like me this platform. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.